As you know very well by now, there was an illegal act committed again by the Trump regime. What else is new? They illegally invaded a country, bombed a country, and kidnapped its sitting president and first lady and took them out of the country. I mean, this is something that obviously violates international law. It's an overthrow of a government. And look, it's not the first time that the United States of America in its government has done this. Of course, as I think you know by now, I've talked a lot about this on The Politicrat. I've mentioned a book called Overthrow, which is this book here by Stephen Kinzer, in which he details a centuries-long campaign of U.S. governments overthrowing democratically elected regimes, and some maybe not democratically elected, but the vast majority democratically elected regimes, many of them in Latin America, many of them in South America. We've seen this over and over and over again. So this is not a surprise, and I think that context is important, and it's also important to realize and recognize that we've seen this in whichever party the president belongs to, whether it's a Democratic president or a Republican one. And to say that is not both sides. To say that is fact. And I think it's important for us to unmoor ourselves from party fealty or cheerleading or waving pom-poms for one party or another. Obviously, we vote for Democrats, and that's very important, and you can't lose sight of that. But what is also important is to understand history and to understand that presidents from the Democratic Party, presidents from the Republican Party, presidents from any party have been involved in intervening in countries that they have no business intervening in. We've seen this if you go back to Woodrow Wilson back in the early 1900s, 1913, when he walked into the White House and his tenure ended in 1921. He was a Democrat. I understand you may say, oh, different type of Democrat, but he was a Democrat. And he went in to numerous places, including Honduras, and went in there and turned things upside down. You have this obviously as well in the 1950s with Truman. If you look at Truman, also a Democratic president, he authorized a plan called PB Fortune, which ended up, with the help of the subsequent administration, Eisenhower, a Republican, overthrowing the government in Guatemala. So, you know, it was Truman who brought the blueprint of that in, and not to mention, we know about Truman, of course, dropping bombs, atomic bombs, nuclear bombs on Japan a few years before. So my point is that you have presidents, and no matter who they are, and that's really what we have to be concerned about. It's about the foreign policy of the U.S. government, not about whether someone's a Republican or a Democrat doing this. I saw something today, and I want to get to this very briefly before I get to my main point. I saw someone today on Substack saying, well, the Republican Party is the party of forever war. I want to correct that person. And I want to say the U.S. government is the government of forever war. And we have to not lose sight of that. I think if we start looking and only pointing at a party here or a party there, we lose sight of the whole point, which is what Eisenhower once said, is the military-industrial complex. Whether it's the Republicans doing it or the Democrats doing it, it is a machinery that either party or both parties use. And it might be more Republicans lately than Democrats, but both parties have done this. It's the machinery that we need to be criticizing and the policy, not about whether it was an R versus a D. And that's what a system wants. As long as it has us talking about, well, the R's do it and the D's do it and the R's do it more than the D's do. And we should point that out. But as long as the system has us doing that, the system stays in place and it never gets challenged. It never really does. And so Eisenhower, when he gave his speech about the military-industrial complex, we must make sure that this doesn't become this undue influence. On the date that he gave that speech, January the 17th, 1961, he had Patrice Lumumba on the African continent, in the Congo, the leader of the Congo. He had him assassinated on that very same day. Eisenhower, Republican, had given the go-ahead to the CIA to get involved in a plot that would poison Lumumba, will ultimately have him before a firing squad on the very same day that Eisenhower gave that outgoing speech in 1961, January 17th, 1961. You can go look this up. That's the same day that Patrice Lumumba was assassinated by the CIA on the orders of one Dwight D. Eisenhower. So, on the one hand, that speech is celebrated, the military-industrial complex, we should never yield to that. And on the other hand, that very same day, probably before Eisenhower even gave that speech, Eisenhower that is, had a democratically elected leader of the Congo on the African continent, Patrice Lumumba, assassinated. So now we fast forward to all of these other presidents. And we fast forward to people like Richard Nixon and what he and Henry Kissinger ended up doing. But that was preceded by a Democratic president, LBJ, who was architected into Vietnam. He really had the blueprints for that, as did Kennedy before him. And those are the kinds of stories that people don't like to tell. But this is the history, and these are the facts. There's a great documentary, by the way, on a lot of this as well, called Cover Up, which is on Netflix right now, featuring the award-winning, Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Seymour Hersh. And that documentary goes into this, and there are lots of books that I could recommend to you on this as well. But the thing is that this is not about one party or another. It's about this machinery. So you can have a Republican president give a speech like Eisenhower did, but still end up killing Patrice Lumumba, who was a freedom fighter on the African continent in the Congo. You could have someone like JFK talking about, we don't want a Pax Americana, and yet he has the blueprints for plans in Vietnam. You can have someone like LBJ who talks all this kind of talk, and LBJ who talked about how we were progressing so well in Vietnam when the opposite was true. We had the My Lai massacre. William Calley. We had all these other things going on. And then it was Nixon who promised to get us out of Vietnam and, committed treason, by the way, to get into the White House in the first place in 68, got sworn in 69, and hey, there was no better deal for the North Vietnamese. There was, 6 more years of war? So, and Kissinger bombing places, Laos, Cambodia, bombing like crazy and still getting a Nobel Peace Prize? I mean, is that what's going to happen at the end of this year? That the guy who bombed Venezuela ends up with a Nobel Prize? Do you think that's going to happen? I mean, Henry Kissinger got one, and he bombed the heck out of Laos. He bombed the heck out of Cambodia. But my whole point is that this is about a machinery and a system. That's what my point is. And that's the kind of thing that people in the 1960s actually got and understood in this country. That's the thing that people in the 1970s got when they protested against Nixon. And in the 60s when they protested against LBJ. Hey, LBJ, how many kids did you kill today? The anti-war movement, my point is, in this country really understood that it was a machinery. And not that people don't understand that now, but it's just that there's so much of this left versus right stuff, and I get it. And I'm completely on board. We need to back Democrats and vote for them. We also have to be aware of what the history is. We have to be aware of that, because we've had Democrats vote for these wars too. We've had Democrats vote for the Iraq invasion. Most Democrats did. Barbara Lee was the only Democrat who stood up against the Patriot Act, refused to vote for it on 9/11, just after 9/11, and Democrats vilified Barbara Lee, also a Democrat. She was the only person who stood up against the Patriot Act. Less than a week after the terrorist attacks on our country, Democrats were calling her everything but a child of God. She stood up and did the right thing. That story isn't often told. So my point is that all these administrations, varying degree, in varying ways, one way or another, have employed these kinds of mechanisms. George W. Bush in Iraq, as I've mentioned. Bill Clinton bombing the Sudan during the Lewinsky affair and scandal. A lot of this now has become about distractions. Now, we've seen this, right? We've seen this. Bill Clinton literally did bomb a Democratic president, again, because this is not about D versus R. And I really want to, I think you understand that very well, dear viewer. This is not about that. And I really do rail and wince at people who come on these forums, whether it's here or anywhere else, and say, oh, one party is the party of forever war. No, no, no. It's a system that is a forever system of war. It's not about one party or another. But anyway, I'm not going to keep repeating myself there. But all these people, whether it was Clinton bombing these kind of an aspirin factory, you can go look this up in the Sudan during the time the Lewinsky situation was going on as a distraction. We've seen this over and over and over again. George W. Bush, going into Afghanistan after 5 months before making a deal with the Taliban, and the CIA making a deal with the Taliban on all kinds of things to do with poppies and drugs and all those kinds of things. 5 months later, he's going into Afghanistan and bombing a country after 9/11 that had already been reduced to rubble during the Soviet war against Afghanistan. So it was just for show, essentially. Didn't get bin Laden, had him trapped in the mountains of Tora Bora, didn't get him. And then it was Obama who did. Later on, years later. Then you had Iraq with George W. Bush, same thing. Bush's ratings were terrible, and he concocted this idea to go into Iraq and go there for oil, which is what a lot of these interventions are all about, natural resources. Iraq is, had lots of oil, and George W. Bush and Dick Cheney and Halliburton, the company that Dick Cheney owned, they made lots of money off of this. This has gone on forever. You go back to the 1950s and United Fruit and the Dulles brothers. Alan Dulles, who was the director of the CIA, and John Dulles, who was the national security advisor. They worked together hand in glove back in the early 1950s and what they did throughout the 1960s. And, one of the Dulles brothers had close connections to United Fruit, which is a big company, corporation, and they wanted to have a maximum share and have better profits. And so, all these countries in Latin America ended up getting targeted and overthrown. Not to mention, and on a different level, Mossadegh in Iran got overthrown. Eisenhower in power then. George W. Bush in 2003 with Iraq. We can go down the line. And now this clown who's in the White House now doing what he's doing. Doing about oil. Absolutely about oil. This is not about drugs. Venezuela doesn't have any real drug trade at all. The drug trade in Latin America, in that area, in South America and Latin America, is really coming from places like Honduras, hence the pardoned ex-president, who put over a 14-year period 500 tons of cocaine into the United States. It's a fact. Honduras, Colombia, Mexico. Those are the three biggest countries in that region that have drugs coming into the United States. Venezuela is not one of those countries that's throwing drugs into the U.S. This is all about oil. Venezuela has the largest amount of oil reserves anywhere in the world. It produces more than 300 billion barrels. That's what it has. 300 billion barrels of oil, 303 billion barrels of oil. It accounts for 17% of the total amount of oil, crude oil, that is owned in the world. They own 17% of it. It's the largest percentage of any country. And down the list, and I think number 3 or 4 is Iran. Iran and Venezuela have a connection. They do business together. And Iran and Venezuela are bonding together, and there's no accident that we've had 2 of the countries that this I'm not even going to call him president, that this clown bombed, this felon bombed, were what? Iran in the summer, on a Saturday no less, and Venezuela on a Saturday. This is all about distraction, but it's also very dangerous. It's very important to point that out. It's a very dangerous distraction. And when you really think about all of this, dear viewer, and thank you for watching. Really appreciate you. Hit the hearts and subscribe and all the rest. Thank you for that. When you really think about what this really means, is that you have unchecked power. Unchecked power. No looking at Congress. Congress is basically a doormat that every one of these presidents have wiped their feet on over the last 70 years, 80 years. Vietnam wasn't declared. I think the last one was World War II, and we were slow to get into that because, again, a Democratic president, FDR, didn't seem to care too much about Jewish people. I'm giving you facts. This is not me. I've got no reason to make all this up. This is all documented. He was very slow to enter World War II. So look, what I'm saying is that what you saw today was outrageous and despicable and disgusting. It was obviously a violation of international law. I think we're all obviously aware of that. It violated the UN charters. It was absolutely despicable. And also it showed you how stupid and foolish and incompetent this person is. And the people standing behind him, like Marco Rubio, in some ways, is even worse. He knows better, but refuses to do better, groveling and kissing up to an orange felon. And you know who else was on that stage today, by the way, who didn't speak? There were two people who didn't speak. Do you know one of them who didn't? Stephen Miller. Stephen Miller played as big a role in all of this as the CIA did today, because if you watch the corporate news media in the United States, they're not raising critical questions, and you know why they're not, which is why independent media right here on Substack is your go-to. Al Jazeera is your go-to. Roland Martin is your go-to. DemocracyNow.org is your go-to. These and other places, KPFA, Pacifica Radio, is your go-to. Occasionally NPR and WNYC are your go-tos. You know, Stephen Miller stood there today and he didn't say a word. Not one. But it was Stephen Miller. If you look at his bio and what he's done over the last few years, he was a big proponent of Venezuela getting in there and doing damage. These are the kinds of people. Stephen Miller is doing a lot of things under the table, out of sight, but it was very telling that Nosferatu, absolutely, Nosferatu was in the building, and his dirty little fingerprints, his dirty Nazi fingerprints, are all over this. The CIA, all over this. They've been planning this since the beginning of this year. This operation, something like this, does not happen overnight, obviously. And let me tell you something else that you may not realize right now. And it's a good question, Denise. Why do I think he didn't speak? That's a great question. Maybe Denise, my gut, and it's a great question to ask. I think my gut reaction to this, and again, it's just a completely uneducated guess, is because he probably, it sounds really cynical in my view, that what I'm about to say, he probably didn't want to put his foot in his mouth. And I just think that, remember that time a few months ago on CNN where he was shouting out, Donald Trump has plenary power. He has lots of power. Remember that live on CNN when he did that? And then he pretended that there was some technical glitch. I can't hear you. You remember all of that? Maybe that's why. I don't know, Denise, but that's a great question. But I think that's probably part of it. But I just think his presence there spoke volumes today. But the thing I wanted to get to, and I want to close this down shortly because I don't want to keep you very long on this Saturday evening, is something that you may not remember or may not realize. Donald Trump today said to you that, this is about drugs, or it's about drugs. And we know it's not, right? We also know that, as I said earlier, he pardoned somebody who over a 14-year period had brought 500 tons. That's right, no exaggeration, 500 tons of cocaine into the US of A over a 14-year period. Merrick Garland, for all his faults, got a conviction against the ex-president of Honduras in 2024. 45-year prison sentence. And then last month, what did Donald Trump do? Pardoned him. Right? The thing that I want to leave you with today, or this evening, or whenever you happen to be watching this, and thank you for watching it if you're watching it live, and if you're watching it later, thank you. What I want to leave you with is that earlier in the year of 2025, maybe around March or April, there was someone, I forget his first last name, Joe something or other, not Biden, Joe someone, in this regime we presently have, who authorized officials inside the White House to change the intelligence and the reports on drugs and Maduro. There were many intelligence communities around the world, including the United States, put out a memo and found that Maduro's government had no connection to Tren de Aragua, the drug-running folk in the gangs in Venezuela. No connection, no drugs running between them, nothing. That is documented. I'm going to be talking about this on tomorrow's episode of The Politicrat. Lots of reporting from the New York Times on this, particularly in March of last year, which you can look up. I will detail all that tomorrow on the Politicrat podcast, so please make sure that you listen to that. And this official named Joe whatever had other people in the White House change the assessment and reporting so that they could find something, completely make up something about Maduro supposedly having links to Tren de Aragua, which he doesn't, because all these intelligence communities around the world, including here in the US, said that there was no connection between them, no drug running between them, nothing at all, nothing at all. And this was part of the plan to get to where we end up with now, with a regime out of power. No matter how much people, maybe you yourself included, I'm not a fan of Maduro, but it doesn't matter whether I'm a fan of Maduro or whether you're a fan of Maduro. What I'm not a fan of, even more so than not being a fan of Maduro, is of any government that we pay taxes to, going and removing people that maybe they don't like or you or I don't like, and just getting rid of them, getting them out of the country. That's not good policy. It's not good international policy, foreign policy. It doesn't make us safer. It doesn't make anyone safer. It doesn't make Venezuelan people any more safe at all. It destabilizes everything. And so all of these plots and all of these things lead up to what we've seen today. And if you watch American news media, and I feel sorry for you if you do watch the corporate news media in this country, you won't hear anything about the casualties. Civilian casualties, there were some. Just don't know how many at the moment. Venezuelan government, Dulce Hernandez, who is now the president, has urged Donald Trump to reinstate and bring back Maduro. Of course, we know that's not going to happen now. But you don't hear anything about the casualties. The press, typically lapdogs, no surprise. When the U.S. government goes to war, the press goes to sleep. The American corporate press goes to sleep. When the U.S. government goes to war, the American corporate press goes night-night. I mean, there was a press in the 1960s and 70s, including CBS News, that actually did do great reporting in Vietnam right when it was happening. They were showing you dead bodies. They were showing you the sounds of war, the sights and sounds of war. Harry Reasoner in Vietnam, Dan Rather in Vietnam. That's when the press actually did its job, when the corporate press, although they were probably less corporate back then, but that's when the press really did their job here in the U.S., holding truth to account, truth to power. And all the stuff with the Pentagon Papers, once that all went away, the government of the U.S. resolved never to allow for any of these kinds of things to be so openly broadcast. And they restricted areas that the press could go in. And then you went from Harry Reasoner and Dan Rather openly in Vietnam, right there in the field, showing you what was happening before your very eyes, to 2003 in Iraq, and reporters, embedded reporters with the U.S. military. That was the only way that the reporters back in 2003, the likes of Ted Koppel and others, were getting access to what was going on in Iraq. It wasn't on their own accord. They couldn't just roam about anywhere they wanted to. They just couldn't do that. They weren't allowed to do that. Israel isn't allowing international journalists in Gaza. They refuse to. And they know why. So all of these things are going on. The press deliberately not asking the right questions, which is why you need independent media, fellow folks here on Substack who do that job, people who give you information, yours truly, and many others that you trust to do the job and do the research. People, and you know who those people are, whether it's the likes of Lev Parnas, Aaron Parnas, Zev Shalev, Joy Reid. You know, I can go on and on. I don't want to leave people out, but you get the idea. These are the kinds of people who give you the information. And this is something that is very clear. The other thing I want to leave you with is this is all theater. All of what happened today is theater. It's dangerous theater. Because if you think that Russia and China aren't smiling tonight, you're out of your mind. Russia and China are absolutely thrilled at this. But why? Why? Even if they stand with Maduro, nominally stand with him, they're thrilled because Russia has got something called a country called Ukraine. Well, you know that obviously. And China has a country called Taiwan. And they've just been given the green light by the felonious regime that we have here to do what you want. It's all about business. It's all about power. It's all about dividing the spoils of war, the spoils of colonialism, the spoils of interventionism. That's what this is about. It's absolutely about that. Donald Trump doing what he did today gives Russia a wink and a nod, and gives China a wink and a nod. Dictatorship in Russia, Putin. Dictatorship in China, Xi. Wannabe dictator in the US, Trump. Talk about an axis of evil, a triangulation of evil. You know, that's my analysis of it. I think it's pretty clear. If you are a student of politics and geopolitics, you have no other conclusion for which to come to or from which to reach. You can't. And I don't traffic in conspiracy theories. I don't do that. If I don't know, I don't know. And if I'm speculating, I'll tell you, but I'm not going to go down a conspiracy theory route. I can't stand conspiracy theories, actually. I deal with facts. And if I don't know, I don't know. And I will try to learn. And so I think, though, it's pretty darn clear that Donald Trump doesn't give two craps about Ukraine. That's well established. He was a transactional beast. He said that during that ridiculous press conference he held today. Clown car press conference. He doesn't care about Ukraine. And he doesn't much care about Taiwan. He wants to be in the league with the big boy dictators. That's what this is about for him. He wants to be elevated to that level. And he wants to show Russia and China that he can do it too. I can invade. What about the no more wars, Donald? What about all of that no more war stuff that you were saying? Well, we know that you were lying. But it's really, really clear to me that this is all about flexing muscles that he doesn't have. It's all about making money, because if you think for 1 second that Donald Trump is not going to make some money out of any kind of oil situation that comes out of Venezuela, or we're going to run the country. Who's running? How are you running it? No, it's not that you're going to run the country. It's that you're going to ruin the country. That's what you're going to do. You're going to ruin the country, and you're going to extract its resources, and you're going to make billions of dollars. Just like Cheney and his stock. Dick Cheney, now the late Dick Cheney, made millions and billions of dollars off of Iraq with Halliburton. Stock prices went through the roof. This is the great, in quotes, American tradition. It's been going on for over 100 years. So Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth, who was an absolute joke. I mean, imagine getting up there and saying Maduro effed around and found out. It's the most cowardly thing. This bombing today should really disgust you, and it does disgust me. And those Republicans are absolute cowards. We know that. There were a few Democrats that spoke out, but again, as I said earlier, there were Democrats that voted to go to war in Iraq, including Biden when he was a senator, including John Kerry when he was a senator, and John Kerry fought in Vietnam. So, this is the thing. This is really despicable stuff. And I guess the final thing I want to say is we have to take this outrage and this anger and this sick feeling we have in the pit of our stomachs and our guts, and we have to make our voices heard, not only here on Substack, but let our elected representatives in our constituencies hear from us. What's your stand on this? Ask them. Tell them how you feel. You can call the switchboard in DC, and I'm sure you can get their numbers more directly to their personal offices. But the people who represent you in Washington, whether they are congresspersons or senators, call 202-224-3121 or 202-225-3121 and let these people know how you feel. Call up your local congressperson. Call up your senators. Let them know how you feel tonight. Let them know how you feel tomorrow. Spread the word. Yes, we should talk and talk to each other here and air our feelings, but we absolutely must contact our representatives. And we have to vote. We have to mobilize. We have to educate people, right? We have to educate people who don't know about the politics like we do. You and I are much more versed in these things. And we have a duty to not only be upset like we should be and raise our voices, we have a duty to educate people that we know who need that education. Give them a 5-minute lesson or a 5-minute, crash course on what's been happening. I just think that's really important because you and I are in a better position with our knowledge and our information and what we know and the facts to educate other people. And that's what's so empowering. And I'm so happy. And I just looked up in the comments here. Denise says she's going to call in her state there in Michigan. Well, that's great, Denise. And I think that everybody should do what Denise is doing. I mean, I think it's important to let your elected officials know, whether you voted for those persons or not, how you feel as a constituent. Find out where they are on this. Maybe your elected representatives have been very quiet tonight, whether you're in a Republican district or a Democratic one, and maybe they've been very quiet. You need to find out from them why they're not speaking up. And again, there may be Democrats who are quiet. You need to find out why they're not speaking up. And if they are speaking up, call them and thank them for doing so. If you're in Vermont, for example, and Becca Balint, who is on the House Judiciary Committee, who spoke out today, she was pretty out front. And then I think Tim Kaine may have made a statement or two. But if your representative has spoken out, call them and say thank you for speaking out. And then demand of them, when they get back into power, hopefully, of course, after these midterms, demand that they actually go after these people and impeach them. I mean, what we saw today is obviously yet another of the 1,000 other impeachable offenses over the last almost 4 months. This is yet another of them. No threat. Maduro never posed a threat to the United States of America. Where? It was bombings and killings over 115 people in Venezuela or in Venezuela waters. Where's the evidence? Still haven't shown us any evidence, Pete Hegseth. Incompetent Pete. And of course, the word incompetent has the word P-E-T-E in it, right? So his name is naturally part of incompetence. Incompetence. Hegseth. Where's your evidence? You said kill everybody on September the 2nd of 2025. Kill everybody. You gave that order. That's an impeachable offense. No evidence that there was a threat to the United States. And even if these fishermen had drugs, that alone is not a justification to go and blow up a boat. No, it's not a justification. And we have to keep speaking out about this. And then, Rebecca, thank you. It's great to see you, Rebecca. Thank you. Putting in a phone call in New York. Excellent. That's what we need to do. And if you've done this already, great. And you're watching this later and you've done that, great. But I think each and every one of us here needs to let our elected representatives know how we feel. It's great doing it on Substack. It's great doing it on social media. But really, tonight, tomorrow, whenever you choose to do it, I really, really want you to contact your local representatives, again, in Congress, in the Senate, even your local politicians. I want you to do that. That's so very important because that's the connection that you and I have to have to the people that we vote for or don't vote for. Because if they don't hear from us, they will think, oh, they don't seem to care. Believe me, these folks listen. They have staffers that pass on your voicemails. They have staffers who read out your emails. I'll tell you a quick story about this. I once wrote a letter, handwritten, to Dianne Feinstein, the late Senator Feinstein out here in California. And to my shock, a month later, she actually responded with a 2-page letter to me. I forget what the issue was about at the time. And whether she signed it personally or whether it was auto-penned or whatever, she responded. It said U.S. Senate, had her address on it, her office, and I never expected in a million years that would have actually got a response. I wrote about something, I was passionate about whatever it was, and it was obviously something that got the senator's attention because Senator Dianne Feinstein here in California wrote back to me. I'm telling you, these folks do listen to your voicemails, to your phone calls, to your emails, to your texts, to your letter writing. They read they have staffers and aides do this. And they get passed on. Believe me, they get loads of phone calls. And if they're not getting loads of phone calls from you, they've got no pressure to do anything. Mamdani was elected and was sworn in a couple of days ago. I still need to watch the whole thing. I missed the whole blooming thing. Mamdani has to be held to account too. I think he's going to be very good as mayor, but my point is we have to hold whoever's in power accountable. We cannot walk away and not continue to, if you're in New York City at least, continue to engage him. You've got to keep him honest. You've got to keep any of these people honest. So, that's what I wanted to say. Probably gone on way too long because, my trademark long episodes of The Politicrat. I'm trying to actually keep them to an hour. So far, the one episode I did, I think on the 2nd of January, was just about an hour and 2 minutes. I'm going to try to keep every episode to around that length because, 3.5 hour episodes, that's 4 hours. Nah, come on. But I do want to thank you very much. Yvette, I really like that point you made. We can't idolize politicians, Yvette writes, if we like them. No, I agree. Whether we like a politician or not, we've got to hold them accountable. We really, really do. It's so important. I think in this country, and Yvette, thank you for that. I appreciate your kind words. It's always good to see you. And I appreciate your support, as do I appreciate all of your support. I think in this country, we have this celebrification of politicians. We've had this celebrification of politicians for a long time in this country. We can go back to the 1960s with Reagan. Actually, before that, because remember, in the 1950s, he was doing General Electric Theater on television around 1957 or so. He became governor. He was a Screen Actors Guild president. He was a B-movie actor. And then in the 60s, he became governor of California. And that was not a good experience. Then, of course, he became president of the United States. And that was not a good experience. And people lionized Reagan. Oh, the great communicator. Not exactly. Not exactly. Not exactly. But the point is that, look at what that regime was involved in. Look at what Reagan was doing. Look at what John Tower and John Poindexter were doing and Oliver North were doing. And Eugene Hassenfuss, who passed away, I think, last year, was doing with Contras. Drugs, Iran, drugs for hostages, arms for hostages with Iran. Adnan Khashoggi, billionaire arms dealer. I mean, this is what we need to be focusing on. We need to be focusing on facts and history instead of one party versus another. And like I say, yes, we need to vote every Republican out. We have to do that. But we also have to remember there is an overriding system that these parties use, right? And even if it's the party that we happen to like or vote for, you have to also pull that out because, as Malcolm X once said, what's wrong is wrong, and wrong is wrong no matter who does it or says it. And Malcolm was correct. Absolutely. So, we cannot be cheerleading a politician or cheerleading a party because these parties have let us down. I'm not advocating not voting. You must vote Democratic. I don't care. Listen, you have to vote Democratic. All right. That's just the way things are. But you also, once you vote for a Democrat, you have to keep pushing these folks. You don't. We made a big mistake back in the 2000s when we voted for Obama and then turned around and looked the other way, and we didn't keep pressing him because we loved him. Many of us loved him. I was one of them. I voted for him twice. I didn't do the work I needed to do to keep on him. So I'm calling myself out too. I won't come on here and say that people have to do this and not hold myself accountable. No, you have to be honest with yourself, and we have to be honest about what we're looking at. And people saying both sides, I think that's part of the problem. Yes, the both sidesism of certain publications are big problems too, but we react with both sides. I'm sorry, me making an assessment or anyone making an assessment that both Democratic and Republican presidents have done these things is not an issue of both sides. That's about the facts. It's about facts. If I tell you that FDR has done some unholy things and Eisenhower has done some unholy things and even Kennedy and LJ and Bush and W. Bush and this loser who's in the White House, this criminal who's in there now, if I tell you all of that, that's not about both sides. That's about the actual facts that have happened, right? So people who say that on here, who say, oh, that's both sides, I'm sorry, those people don't know what they're talking about. And then I get really suspicious of them. And I wonder, what's your role here? Other than muddying the waters and being purely dishonest. What is your function? So, look, all of that is to say, kind of, I hate to use the word that Reagan used, trust but verify. Although I would say verify but verify, and then trust if you can, right? It's not about being paranoid. It's just, we're living, and I said this before in my podcast, the Politicrat podcast, we're living in an age of disinformation. This is a disinformation age. And we have the responsibility to respond with facts, not with comments like, oh, both sides or whataboutism. And maybe that stuff happens. I'm not saying it doesn't, but our responsibility is to be reactionary with facts. React with the facts, not with the impulse statements that we all make. And I've been guilty of it too. This is how we really get to a semblance of a democracy, with the facts. And being honest with ourselves and being honest when we've made mistakes. I've made a million of them. How can you learn if you don't make, mistakes is how you learn. And hopefully we are all introspective enough to do that, and we have to, right? Because that's how you have a better society, All of this conspiracy nonsense, and Rebecca pointed to it in the comments here, is a bunch of bullcrap. And people planting false things and lies and BS and all the trolls and bots that come on Substack or anywhere else. They're everywhere, these bots and trolls. People who have these fake accounts and want to and say it's both sides and all the conspiracy stuff and some of the stuff and people who I think even subscribe to me. I've had to look at that and say, I'm sorry, that's just not accurate what you're saying. Where did you get that information from? And we might have to really be willing to be more vigorous with each other in order to move to a place where we have people who care about the country genuinely. Zohar Mamdani, I think, cares about the country he lives in. Jasmine Crockett, I think, cares about the country she lives in. AOC, I think, cares about the country she lives in. Ilhan Omar, Bernie Sanders. I can go through a whole lot of other people. I think these people genuinely care. And we have to all hold them all to account. And we can admire them and respect them. But again, we cannot act like these people are celebrities. And I know we do Obama to the celebrification of Obama, the rock star, and the media, the corporate news media plays a lot into that. Right? It does. But that's why independent media is important. Al Jazeera is important. KPFA, Pacifica Radio, important. NPR, WNYC, again, democracynow.org, people who are on Substack who you trust, people, like I said, who do the research. Ellie Leonard is another one I didn't mention. She's been doing excellent work on here. You know, I forget the brother's name now. Gosh, I can't believe I forget his name. The guy is like he's about 18 and 19 years old. The young brother who does excellent stuff here with history and research as well. And I'm so sorry, I don't remember your name. Khalil, I think his name's Khalil Smith. Khalil Brown, Khalil, whatever his name is, Khaleel. Oh gosh, I really am regretting botching his name. That brother does a great job on here. And you need to subscribe to him. He's like 17, 18, 19 years old. He spoke at the Forbes conference. He got thrown out of the Forbes conference. Khalil Green. Thank you, Yvette, for writing his name in there. Khalil Green is his last name, and Yvette, thank you again for putting that in as well. Khalil Green, please subscribe to him. That brother knows what he's talking about. He's on the level. He does excellent work. I don't hear anybody championing him very much. Of the people I listen to, and they need to, and I'll put that in their chats. Champion that brother, Khalil Green. That brother does the research, and he works his tail off on here. Michael Harriot is another one, works his tail off. These are the people you need to be supporting, the Joy Reids of the world, the Khalil Greens of the world, the Michael Harriots of the world, right? The Ellie Leonards of the world. Right? People who are doing the Lev Parnasses and the Aaron Parnasses of the world, the people who are doing the Zev Shalevs, these are the people who are bringing the facts to you. Not trafficking in conspiracy nonsense, not shouting at you and getting outraged all the time, although we need to be outraged. We need facts, and we need reason, and we need sense, and we don't need the reactionary stuff. Zev Shalev, as Rebecca points out, these guys on Waj, thank you for reminding me, Yvette. Wajahat Ali is very good as well. I can't believe I forgot him, but thank you. Waj is terrific. This guy works his tail off. He has the receipts, he does the research. And these are the kinds of people you need to be subscribing to, The people who know what they're talking about, who have the history and the information. I like to think that I do too. I know a little bit what I'm talking about. I document everything I say. And one of the other book I want to finally mention to you is this book, White Malice. Now, this book, and I've talked about this briefly on the Politicrat, this book is written by Susan Williams. She is a white female British historian, and she spent a load of years, and she's still here, she's still alive today. She spent a lot of years researching the CIA and its colonialization of Africa, or the recolonization of the African continent. And you see who's in there? Kennedy. Oh, the Kennedys play a role in the African continent, as do a lot of other administrations. Again, don't look at R&D, look at the policies. And look at, when you have defense budgets, Look at the vote. If you think this is about one, see, this is why, again, and I know I've gone on way too long, and thank you, Yvette, for this, for that kind word about my book recommendations. Thank you. If you think, if you think that this is about one party or another, you're barking up the wrong tree. And I'll tell you why you are if you think that. All you have to do is look at the vote, the roll call vote on the defense budget. Look at the roll call vote in the House and in the Senate on the defense budget every year, and you tell me if it's about the Republicans being the forever war guys. Look at the roll call vote. You tell me how many Democrats don't vote for these big-ass budgets every year. You tell me. You can count them on one hand in the Senate. You're going to see maybe 5 people. You're going to see Ed Markey vote no. You're going to see Warren vote no. Sanders vote no. And you might see Rand Paul of the Republicans vote no. And maybe one other person in the Democrats on the Senate who votes no, right? But the vast majority of both of these parties, when they vote for the defense budget every year, they're voting yay. They are voting yay. So people on here, and I'm not going to name names. I see people who've got lots of followers, more than I have, and I don't care. It's not about the number. I'm just saying that people with bigger platforms have an equal responsibility to get these things correct and not be saying what I think, quite frankly, is irresponsible to say that one party is I get it. There's a number of Republican presidents, yes, who have done this, yes, but there's also, again, it's about any party doing this. And keep looking at these roll call votes of both of these parties. I mean, again, with Iraq, there were very few Democrats that voted no on the Iraq war. Hillary Clinton voted yes on it when she was in the Senate. We cannot let people off the hook here. And that's why I'm really suspicious. I'm sorry to go here, but I'm really suspicious of people on all these forums who are only looking at one group of people when you should be looking at the whole blooming system and what it produces. We have to challenge each other to be better. And Rebecca's very kind. Thank you, Rebecca. She said, we need more people hearing you. Omar, yeah. Well, Rebecca, that's where I know you do this. That's where you come in. Anyone on here, amplify my voice. If you like what I'm saying, and if you trust what I'm saying, and you see the documentation that I bring with these books, right? With these books, then retweet or restack this Substack. Tell people that you know about this Substack and about the Politicrat podcast. That's how you do it. I do these things once in a while coming on camera. I might do a few more of these. I try not to do I'm so busy anyway. I usually don't have time to do this every day. And Raj, I give him credit, man. He's on these things a dozen times a day. Just the nature of my work and things I do, I don't have that kind of time. But I will try to come on here a bit more often. And that helps too, but hitting the heart helps because that drives up algorithms, easy for me to say. And MJ, 100%, thank you for saying what you've just said. MJ Cook writes, right and left are two wings of the same bird. Thank you, MJ, for saying that. You said that much better than I did. I've been kind of rambling around it, and you said it in one great sentence. It's so true. And that if you are somebody who believes in truth and believes in having a better country and a country that aspires for democracy, right, and believes in that, then yeah, you've got to look at this as the same bird. It is the same bird. It absolutely is. And MJ, thank you for saying that. Oh my gosh. Again, even people that I like on here don't emphasize that enough. Some people don't. But again, I know I've gone on way too long. We have to be agents for truth, and we have to be agents for the facts. And we got to avoid the trolls and the bots and the people on here who say these really weird things that in your soul do not ring true to you. And are BS distractions or trolling or bots. People on here who say these weird things. When you present the facts, they present BS. I've seen a number of people on here who push this nonsense. And it's 2026. We don't have time for nonsense. So I either brush it aside, make a quick response, and move on, because we've got to focus on 2026 and these midterms. We have to focus on primaries. We have to focus on getting people registered to vote. We have to register people to vote. Check your voter registration twice a month. We cannot afford to get distracted. We know that this today was a very dangerous distraction, and we know that it's going to be a mess, and there are going to be other distractions. Fear is something that people have, but we've got to use our fear and propel ourselves to be active and stay active. And I see these comments on here sometimes, not on here, on this Substack, but on other people's Substack. There's always seven. It's okay, I understand people are afraid, but there's always people saying, I'm afraid, I'm afraid. But you know what I'm tempted to ask them? I'm tempted to ask them, okay, what are you doing with your fear? It is all right to be afraid, but what are you doing? Are you sitting in your fear and not doing anything? Or are you using your fear to actually propel yourself to do something? Or are you just saying that to try to spread an air of defeatism in a chat, or to try to discourage people? Oh, I'm afraid. Oh, I'm so afraid. Are you planting that? Again, this is not conspiracy. I'm just speculating. When people do that, are they doing it because they're really afraid, or are they doing it to try to discourage other people or spread fear and panic and concern in a chat? I don't know. I'm just openly asking the question. And as Rebecca said, the arrogance. Yeah, there's a lot of arrogance too. Substack is not perfect, and I get it. I'm certainly not perfect. I type in all caps to be heard, not to be annoying. Although I know people are annoyed by it sometimes, but And as Rebecca says, distraction. Yeah, the arrogance and the distraction. Lots of that on here too. Lots of that on here. And you know who those people are. You know who they are. People have other agendas, and what the cream of the, listen, I'm trying to say it like this. You know the wheat from the chaff, and you separate them. You know who's got what they're saying. You know who's saying something sincerely, and you know who is being arrogant or being defeatist or trying to distract or trying to belittle you or berate you because you say something that you know in your soul is so true and got the facts written all over it, and then someone's trying to distract you to something else or to belittle something, or you say that something is racist and then they come back with some other comment to try to distract you from the point you're making, or you're saying something about misogyny, right? Or people being anti-Semitic or Islamophobic, and then someone's trying to make a comment to distract and deflect away from that. Or they say, well, everybody is this, or well, everybody's that. No, don't take that nonsense. Either ignore them or respond or move on. This is about trusting your gut. Thank you, Denise. That's something that I am a strong believer in. You have to trust your gut. And if something is not right in your heart and soul, then it isn't right. If your gut instinct tells you that you can't trust what I'm saying, and you really think that I'm being inauthentic or that I'm selling you a bill of goods, then you have to say, I'm not going to subscribe to him. Or I think he's a BS artist. Or I think he's a glory hunter, as we say in England. I think he's a glory hunter. I think he's somebody who's shilling for someone else. And we know there are people on this platform, I'm not mentioning any names, but you know who I'm talking about, who are shilling for people who do not have our interests at heart, who make lots of money on paid subscriptions, and they're not producing anything, but they're attacking people. You know who the entertainers are on this platform? They do their lives, they entertain you, but they don't give you anything in the way of real facts. They give you gossip. They give you, oh, ooh, the tea. Not April Ryan, because I think April Ryan's terrific. And I know she has a show called The Tea, but April Ryan's a good person, and you should also subscribe to her. I'm not talking about April Ryan. I think she does an excellent job. But you know who I am talking about. It's all Gossip Central every freaking day. Gossip, gossip, gossip. Not telling you to vote, not telling you to get registered, not educating you on the process, but they're always talking gossip. Ooh, what happened today here? It's like a National Enquirer theater. I'm sorry. And these people are famous. They make lots of money. Good for them. I'm not a hater. But I'm just telling you, recognize in 2026 where the distraction is and where the authenticity is. And go with the authenticity. Go with your gut. This is about us being more careful, more coherent, more peaceful, more action-oriented, and more loving. And there are other great suggestions, and I know that you've mentioned there, Rebecca, two people who also do some really good work as well. Heather Cox Richardson and Alison Gill. They do good work, And I know, by the way, I know people sometimes say that we should deal with truth, and we should deal with facts, and we should deal with accountability. And I know Alison actually one day had mentioned that accountability shouldn't be the priority, truth should be. I think both should be. I think both truth and accountability have to be our priorities. And we need to say that to the people that we are electing, or people who are in our jurisdiction as political leaders, people who are in Congress. We need to tell them about truth and accountability. We have to push them to do this. These Democrats, if the Democrats get in, before we even vote the Democrats in for the midterms, we have to tell them that accountability and the facts and impeachment is exactly what we want. We want inquiries. We want hearings. We want these people brought before the bar. We want them put out there so that they can face accountability. That's what we have to do. And when these guys get elected, or these women get elected next year or this year, whenever, we have to hold these folks accountable. Just because they're Democrats, it doesn't mean we just turn around and go home. As you know, there are some Democrats that aren't doing a good job. And I'm not going to mention the names, but you know who they are. Out of New York City. Speaking of New York City, you know who they are, right? They're Democrats, but every Democrat doesn't do a great job, right? Every Democrat is not, doing the things they should be doing. And there's maybe one Republican or two that actually does the right thing. But they're Democrats, and I think Rebecca's alluded to that, some of whom, they're not cutting the mustard. They're not doing their job. And there's other ones more than the two people in New York City that I'm thinking about. There's some in Florida that aren't cutting the mustard either. A couple of them in Florida, I'm not mentioning names, but you know who those two people in Florida are, who have come up short a lot, who kind of defend people who are unholy. Bibi Netanyahu. I don't have to go any further than that. MJ, talking about chuckles. Oh, MJ, that's funny. That's really good. Chuckles, yeah. Exactly. I mean, these people, again, this goes to the point I know I've been hitting it home like a vinyl record breaking here, is who's authentic and who's not. You go with your gut on here. With folks on Substack or anywhere in your life, it's not just here. It goes for your life, right? Outside of here. If you see something that, or you have a relationship with somebody, or you see that in your gut, this person, this man or this woman ain't right, and it doesn't sit well with you, hey, you have to move away from them. If you can do that, move away from them, right? Get out. This is not for me. I'm out. I have a really bad feeling about this. I don't know where it is, but it doesn't sit well in my soul. It doesn't sit well in my gut. So I move on. That's what you have to do. So anyway, I do want to thank you. I hope that I got my point across. This is a new year, and we have to be more discerning. We cannot listen. The fan club stuff is a real problem, and I get it. but fan clubs can be really problematic. They can be, you know. It's kind of, remember Groucho Marx years ago once said, I wouldn't want to be a fan or want to be in any club that has me as a member. Groucho Marx said that many years ago. I wouldn't want to be in any club that has me as a member. I kind of agree with Groucho Marx on that. I include myself in that. I really do. But I want to thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Denise. Everybody who's been watching, Yvette, those of you who've watched live, like Yvette, Denise, Rebecca, and many more, MJ, all of you who've been in here, thank you so very much. Paid subscription would be fine, or free subscription would be fine. Whichever one you do, fine with me. I am not going to push one over another. I'm going to just say that there are two options. That is all I'm going to say. If you like what you see here, you can do either. And I thank you all the same. All of you here, Debbie, MJ, Rebecca, every single person that's been in this chat, that's watched, people who are watching later on, thank you very much indeed. And thank you for spending part of your Saturday with yours truly. Don't forget, please subscribe to this particular Substack or to politicrat.substack.com. Also, of course, the podcast, which is available on Apple and numerous other podcasts. That's the Politicrat. There'll be a new episode tomorrow where I go into some really good other information that I want to put before you and try to get that into an hour-long episode or less. And don't forget, as I say, the YouTube channel as well, youtube.com/@the Politicrat, POD. Rebecca, oh, what lovely words. Rebecca, you're awesome. So thank you for those very kind remarks. As ever, everybody, thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday and your Sunday as well. It's been a pleasure having you here. You've been listening to International Gangsters. That is the episode for this particular live. Okay? And thank you very much. I hope you appreciated it. I hope you were edified. And remember these books. If you ever have a chance to read these, please do. It explains a lot, contextualizes a lot that you won't get context on if you're watching the corporate news media. And of course, here too, please do read these two great books. A lot of information in here, a lot of history and a lot of facts, which is what it's all about. History and facts. Take care, everybody, and have a good rest of your weekend. Bye for now.